All right, hey Will. First off, I apologize for the delay. I'm finally finished with the semester and my teaching duties are done, so I've got a bit more um, spaciousness to work with here, and I'm excited to get into your questions. Um, so I've taken some notes based on your emails, and I just watched a talk by Evan Thompson at the International Symposium for Contemplative Studies, where he spoke about or just expressed his concern about the way that mindfulness and meditation and so on are being um, you know expropriated for uh, consumerist capitalist ends, and the way that for example, I don't think he specifically mentions the Wisdom 2.0 conference that takes place in the San Francisco Bay Area every year, every couple years. But there is a way in which these traditional techniques, contemplative techniques, are being abstracted from their cultural context and applied in an entirely different setting, the corporate setting, in order to make employees more feel healthier and more whole while they're doing work that otherwise would feel alienating, and in fact be alienating. And I would certainly share Evan Thompson's critique of the commodification and corporatization of contemplation and meditation and mindfulness and so on. Um, because when you try to abstract these techniques from their cultural context, it's again committing this same old, all too modern bifurcation between facts and values, right? Between culture and nature, between just meaning and technique, you might say. So I would want to direct your attention to Evan's talk if you haven't heard it yet. But also talk a little bit more about his work in neurophenomenology and in biology. His book, Mind in Life, is what is the subtitle? Biology, Phenomenology, and the Sciences of Mind, I think. That book had a tremendous impact on me when I first read it in late 2008, I believe. And, prior to that, when I was an undergrad, I had read the book that he co-authored with Eleanor Roche and Francesco Varela, The Embodied Mind. And that book also had a tremendous impact on me because it allowed me to begin to imagine what a new kind of science might look like that didn't, at least in biology, that didn't separate or bifurcate fact from value, mind from matter, and so on. Because they, by articulating an account of life in terms of autopoiesis and an account of mind in terms of inaction, they allowed for a new kind of science that took, phenomenological experience seriously rather than just assuming it could be reduced to matter in motion, and that the biological world was just a more complicated kind of mechanics that could eventually be understood just as physical science has supposedly understood the material world and universe. Because all of a sudden, from the inactive and autopoietic perspective, the interiority of organisms becomes relevant to understanding their their role within an ecosystem, and their evolution through the course of deep time, the intentions, the capacity for concern that organisms have all of a sudden becomes relevant to the story we tell about the biosphere, the story we tell about the community of life on Earth, right? Its history. So, I was and still am, extremely indebted to the work that Varela and Thompson and others working on this have accomplished. But I think as I studied Whitehead more and his what you could say is an ontology of organism, right? He's a metaphysician. He's doing ontology here and cosmology. I kind of came to see how the basically phenomenological perspective that enactivism and autopoietic biology and so on uh, have is ultimately ontologically underdetermined, right? And it begs questions about the nature of the physical world, that which would be right beyond the horizon of experience of organisms. Because at the end of the day, I think even though Thompson and Varela et al.'s perspective prevents science from taking a reductionistic angle on or approach to biology, it leaves physics to the reductionists and the mechanists. It leaves cosmology to, ultimately be explained in terms of the same old mechanical world picture that we inherit from Descartes. And with Whitehead, we're able to dig into what's going on in a sense behind the scenes there, because yes, he's a speculative philosopher and he's not doing phenomenology anymore, but he's trying to articulate what the ontological presuppositions of enactivism might be, right? So I think this more ontological perspective that Whitehead provides about a universe of actual occasions of experience interlocked in societies of relationships. This is really providing enactivism with its ontology. It's providing complexity science with a new ontology that and quantum and relativity theory and physics with a new ontology that I think the old Newtonian Cartesian ontology needs to be replaced with, because it's the progress of science itself in the 20th and 21st centuries undermined its original ontological superstructure, right? And because of the allergy to metaphysics in the 20th century, science and the philosophers haven't really dug into this type of work to provide a new ontology, when the old one, the mechanistic ontology, fell to pieces. So I think Whitehead allows us to get more into this speculative terrain that isn't necessary to sort of do the more scientific and hopefully experimental work that, say, a neurophenomenologist would do. Neurophenomenologists to do their research, they don't necessarily need to always be talking about the cosmological backdrop or the ontological presuppositions of their phenomenology. Of course they don't. But I think if we want to talk about how we might shift the worldview of our civilization, if we want to start talking about the ethical implications of enactivism, and not just ethical in terms of our relationships to other human beings, but in terms of our relationship to other forms of life entirely, and to the community of life on Earth as a whole. If you want to move in that kind of ecological, ethical direction, then we do need to start doing cosmology, I think. So, we can talk more about what that would look like, but I think for now I'll leave you with this opening gesture towards, a conversation that might occur between the inactivists, between the those interested in contemplative studies, and the conversation between science and Buddhism and so forth. We could start having this other conversation about the cosmological backdrop that could begin to provide lures for transforming human beings, lures that would draw our human societies into not only more harmonious relationships internally among ourselves as human beings, but more harmonious and ethical relationships to the broader community of life within which we draw our life, our own life. So, yeah, I'll leave it there for now.